Hey everyone, welcome back. We get a lot of questions. Hey learners, and welcome back to English Podcast Adventures. I'm Michael.
And I'm Sophia. All right, so today we're diving into something that everyone deals with at some point, and that's health.
Yeah.
And, we all talk about it differently.
Of course.
When we're feeling good or bad or, whatever. You've sent in some materials, and we're going to kind of go through them and really break down the language around how we talk about health.
Yeah, I think this will be really helpful for anyone learning English.
Yeah, especially for, because there's a lot of idioms and stuff.
Oh yeah, tons of them.
So I'll make sure to unpack those.
Yeah, those are the fun ones.
Yeah, so let's jump right into it.
Okay.
So let's start with idiomatic expressions.
All right.
And these are kind of like the spice of the English language.
I like that.
They add a lot of flavor.
Yeah, they do.
But they don't always mean what they literally say.
Right, it's not always like one-to-one.
Exactly.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
it's kind of like you have to know the meaning behind the phrase.
Right, you got to know the secret code.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Let's start with one that I'm sure everybody has heard.
Okay.
And that is under the weather.
Oh, yeah, classic.
So, you might hear somebody say, I've been feeling under the weather all week, so I decided to visit the doctor.
Right.
But if you think about that, literally,
Yeah.
It sounds like you've just been standing outside in the rain.
Exactly. Someone forgot their umbrella or something.
Yeah.
But that's not what it means at all.
No, not at all.
No, it just means feeling unwell
Yeah,
or a little bit sick.
right.
It's just a more interesting way to say, I don't feel well.
Exactly.
And, some people think it comes from, way back in the day when the sailors would have to go below deck
Right.
during bad storms.
Okay.
And they often felt seasick.
Oh.
So they were literally under the weather
I see.
and not feeling great.
Interesting.
Yeah. So it's kind of a cool little
Yeah.
origin story
Yeah.
for that one.
Okay, so let's move on to another one.
Kick the bucket.
Okay.
Now, I've definitely heard this in movies and stuff.
Yeah, for sure.
And it always seems to be it's supposed to be funny, even though, the subject matter is not funny.
Right, it's kind of a dark humor kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
what does that mean?
So, yeah, it's a very informal and sometimes, like we said, kind of darkly humorous way to say that someone has died.
Okay.
So you might hear,
Right.
he was so ill, we thought he might kick the bucket any day or something like that.
Right.
But it's really important to know this is very informal.
Yeah.
You wouldn't want to use this in a serious setting.
Right. Definitely not.
Or a respectful setting.
Yeah. Not at a funeral.
No, not at a funeral.
Or when you're talking to a doctor.
Right.
Yeah.
So just be careful with that one.
Yeah. So maybe one to avoid.
Yeah, probably.
Unless you're with friends or something.
Right, exactly.
Okay, let's move on to another one.
Okay.
On the men. So that sounds like things are getting better.
It does. It does.
So what does that mean exactly?
So on the mend means that you are gradually recovering from an illness or from an injury.
Okay.
So if someone's been in the hospital for a while,
Yeah.
you might hear after weeks in the hospital, she's finally on the mend.
Right.
So it suggests that things are slowly
Yeah.
but steadily getting better.
Right. Like a plant growing back after it's been damaged or something.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay, so that's a positive one.
Yeah, it is a positive one.
Okay, now what about when you're just completely exhausted?
Yeah.
The source mentions run down.
Oh, yeah.
I know that feeling.
I think we all do.
Yeah.
Especially you and I.
Yeah.
With the podcast and everything.
Yeah, so what is run down exactly?
So rundown means that you're feeling physically or mentally exhausted.
Okay.
Often because you've been overworking or you're just under a lot of stress.
Right, so you're not taking care of yourself, basically.
Yeah, and not recharging your batteries. Yeah, so someone might say you look run down. Have you been sleeping properly? Are you eating okay?
Are you working too much?
Exactly. Yeah, you're taking on too much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, and then the final one in the idiom section is in the pink.
All right.
That sounds like a very good place to be.
It does, doesn't it?
So what does that mean?
Yeah, so in the pink means that you are in excellent health.
Okay.
You are in excellent condition.
Right.
You might hear someone say
Yeah.
despite his age, my grandfather is still in the pink.
Right.
It kind of paints this picture of someone who's vibrant and healthy.
Yeah.
Maybe even with a rosy complexion.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's a really positive expression.
Yeah, definitely.
So yeah, those are some common idioms related to health.
Yeah, and like we were saying,
Yeah.
these have figurative meanings, so it's
Got
good to
it.
kind of learn the whole phrase.
Right. Treat it as one unit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's move on to the next section.
All right, go.
And that's collocations.
Collocations.
Yeah, and what exactly are collocations for someone who's still learning English?
Yeah, so collocations are words that just naturally go together in English.
Sure.
So native speakers use these pairings all the time, almost without even thinking about it.
Yeah.
And learning these collocations can really make your English sound a lot more natural, a lot more fluent.
Right.
Like you really know what you're doing.
Yeah.
It's like knowing that salt and pepper go together.
Right.
You wouldn't really say pepper and salt.
Yeah.
Even though the words mean the same thing, it just sounds off.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like that with collocations.
Yeah, that's a good example.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's jump into some examples related to health.
Okay.
The first one here is chronic illness.
All right, so chronic illness refers to a health condition that lasts for a long time.
Okay.
And it usually needs ongoing treatment or management.
Right.
So instead of just saying like long illness, we almost always say chronic illness.
Right.
So for example, diabetes is a chronic illness
Right.
that affects millions of people worldwide.
Right.
So that chronic really emphasizes that.
Yeah.
It's not something that's going to go away very quickly.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, the next one we have is mental well-being.
Okay.
And this is something that we hear a lot about these days.
Yeah, we do for sure.
And for good reason.
Yes.
So what does that mean exactly?
So mental well-being describes your overall psychological and emotional health.
Okay.
It's about feeling good
Right.
and functioning well mentally.
Yeah.
So you might hear something like, exercise has a positive impact on mental well-being.
Right.
So it really emphasizes that, our mental health is just as important as our physical health.
Exactly. They go hand in hand.
They do. They do.
Okay, now on to something a little bit more serious.
Okay.
Risk factors.
Right.
So what are those? So risk factors are things that can increase your chance of developing a certain disease or health problem.
Right.
So think of them as like potential hazards to your health.
Right.
So for example, smoking and poor diet are major risk factors for heart disease.
Right.
So understanding these risk factors can really help people make healthier choices and try to avoid those problems.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay. Moving on. Preventive measures.
Oh, okay.
So what kind of things are we talking about here?
So preventive measures are actions that you take to stop something harmful from happening.
Okay.
So in this case, illnesses or injuries.
Right. So like getting a vaccine.
Exactly.
Or like eating healthy and exercising.
Anything, things like that.
Right.
Yeah. So for example, vaccination is one of the most effective preventive measures against infectious diseases.
Right.
So it's really about being proactive and trying to stay healthy before you actually get sick.
Right. Yeah. Okay, and the final collocation we have here is terminal illness.
All right.
And that sounds pretty serious.
Yeah.
So what does that mean?
So terminal illness is a medical term for a disease that cannot be cured and is expected to lead to death.
Okay.
So it's a very sensitive topic, obviously, and you might hear it in a medical context, like the patient was diagnosed with a terminal illness and given 6 months to live.
Right.
So that word terminal unfortunately indicates that there's no recovery possible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so those are all really good examples of how certain words just fit together naturally in English.
Right, they just sound right together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's move on to phrasal verbs.
Okay.
Now, these can be tricky for English learners.
They can be, yeah.
Because a lot of times the meaning isn't obvious from the individual parts.
Yeah, you can't really guess the meaning.
Right.
Yeah.
So let's go through some examples related to health. All right, sounds good.
The first one is come down with.
Okay.
So what does that mean?
So come down with means to start to get sick.
Okay.
Usually with like a minor illness.
Okay.
Like a cold or the flu.
Right.
Yeah. So you could say something like, I think I'm coming down with a cold because my throat feels sore.
Right.
Yeah. It's a very common way to describe the early stages of feeling unwell.
Yeah. I've definitely heard that one.
Yeah, me too.
Okay. The next one is break out in.
Okay.
That sounds a little dramatic.
It does a little bit.
So what does that one mean?
Yeah. So break out in means to suddenly develop a rash.
Okay.
Or some other kind of skin irritation.
Right.
So for example, you might say, she broke out in hives after eating shellfish.
Right.
So the breakout part really suggests like a sudden and visible reaction on the skin.
Right.
Okay. Next up we have get over.
Okay.
That sounds like it means to recover from something.
It does. It does.
So what does that mean exactly?
Yeah.
Yeah, so get over means to recover from an illness.
Okay.
Or even just to recover from like a difficult experience.
Right.
So you might say, it took me 2 weeks to get over the flu.
Right.
So it implies like a returning to your normal state of health.
Yeah.
And feeling better again.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now here's one that isn't necessarily about being sick yourself,
Okay.
but about caring for someone who is look after.
Okay.
So what does that one mean?
Yeah, so look after simply means to take care of someone.
Okay.
So in a health context, you might say like, my mom looked after me when I was sick.
Right. Yeah.
So it's really about providing that care and
Yeah.
attention and making sure someone's okay.
Right. Okay. And the final phrasal verb we have here is pass away.
Okay.
Now, this is one that I think a lot of English learners already know.
Probably, yeah.
But what does that mean?
So pass away is a very polite,
Okay.
a more formal way to say that someone has died. So it's often used as a gentler alternative
Yeah.
to just saying the word die,
Yeah.
especially in sensitive situations.
Exactly.
So you might hear something like, her grandfather passed away last year,
Right.
so that a way really softens it
Yeah.
and makes
yeah.
it more indirect.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's a more respectful way to say it.
It is. It is.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So you might come down with something.
Mhm.
You might break out in something.
Well,
Hopefully you get over it. You have
Yeah.
somebody to look after you.
Yeah,
And sometimes, unfortunately, people do pass away.
that's true.
Yeah. Okay, so let's move on to the final section,
Okay.
and that's key verbs.
Key verbs are.
And these are just verbs
Oh,
that
yeah.
come up a lot
They
when
do.
we're talking about health.
Right. They're kind of the building blocks
Yeah,
of any conversation about health.
exactly. And so
Okay.
knowing them is really going to help,
For sure.
understand medical information and
Yeah.
talk about your own health.
Right, if you need
Yeah.
to. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, so let's start with diagnose.
Okay.
So when a doctor uses that word,
Yeah.
what are they talking about?
So diagnose means to identify a disease or a medical condition
Okay.
by examining the symptoms
Right.
and usually doing tests as well.
Right.
So a doctor might say, the doctor diagnosed her with asthma after reviewing her test results.
Right.
So it's really that process
Yeah.
of figuring out
Yeah.
what illness someone has.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, what about recover?
Okay.
So we talked about get over earlier.
Yeah.
Is there any difference?
There is a slight difference.
Okay.
So recover also means to return to a normal state of health
All right.
after an illness or an injury.
Right.
You might hear something like, it took him 3 months to recover from surgery.
Right.
So while get over can sometimes refer to like more minor things or even like emotional difficulties,
Okay.
recover often implies a more significant
Okay.
or longer period of healing. So you get over a cold, but you recover from like
Yeah.
major surgery.
Exactly. Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now treat.
Okay.
So that's what doctors and nurses do
That is, yeah.
to help people get better. So
Right.
what does that mean exactly?
Yeah. So treat means to provide medical care
Okay.
to address an illness or an injury or some other condition.
Right.
So, for example, the nurse treated the wound with antiseptic and bandages.
Right.
So it's really the action that's taken
Yeah.
to help someone heal or manage their health problem.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And we talked about preventative measures.
Right.
So the verb form of that is prevent.
Exactly.
So what does it mean to prevent something?
So prevent means to stop something harmful from happening in the first place.
Right.
So, for example, regular exercise and a balanced diet can prevent many health problems.
Right.
So it's about taking action to avoid illness,
Right.
kind of like closing the door before the wind comes in.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, and then the final key verb we have is prescribe.
All right.
So what happens when a doctor prescribes something?
Yeah. So when a doctor prescribes something, they're officially recommending
Okay.
a specific medication or treatment
Okay.
for a patient.
Right.
So you might hear, the doctor prescribed antibiotics for my infection.
Right.
Yeah. So it's a formal instruction
Right.
for what medicine or therapy
Yeah.
someone should use to get better.
Exactly.
Here.
Okay, well, that was a really helpful overview of
Yeah.
a lot of the vocabulary
You covered a lot.
related to health.
We did.
I think knowing these words and phrases
Yeah.
is really going to help boost anyone's understanding
I agree.
and their confidence when they're speaking English.
Especially if they need to talk about health.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if you found this deep dive helpful,
Yeah.
and you want to explore more vocabulary and other interesting topics.
Yeah. Please like this deep dive, share it with other English learners, and
Yeah.
subscribe to our channel.
It really helps us out.
It does.
Yeah.
So as you continue learning English,
Yeah.
think about all the different ways that people talk about health. We've covered some formal ways, some informal ways. What other words and phrases related to health have you come across out?
Yeah. Let us know in the comments
Yeah.
what other interesting expressions have you heard.
Exactly.
It's all part of this, journey of learning a new language.
Right. Yeah. All right. That's it for today.
Thanks for listening.
See you next time.